In this episode, we spoke with Dr. Lori Moore-Merrell, the U.S. Fire Administrator appointed by President Biden in 2021. With over 30 years of experience in fire service and data analytics, Dr. Moore-Merrell brings unparalleled expertise to our discussion. We'll be exploring how data analytics and emerging technologies like AI and machine learning are revolutionizing fire safety and prevention, including the transition from the National Fire Incident Reporting System to the new National Emergency Response Information System. Stay tuned for an insightful discussion on enhancing community risk reduction and shaping the future of fire administration. Dr. Lori, thank you for taking the time. I really do appreciate it. It's welcome to ICC Region 1 Radio, and happy to have you. Very excited to have you. I think that, as a guest on the podcast, because I think that there's a lot of important things that I'd like to talk about, anywhere from some emerging technologies to some of the major initiatives that you've done throughout the course of your time as the U.S. Fire Administrator. And I think that, one of them is going to be data and data analytics and even the World Fire Congress. So I think a lot of people are going to be very interested to hear that. But before we get into that, if we could talk a bit about your background and, how your experiences have really shaped your role as U.S. Fire Administrator. You've been very active in fire safety and building safety for quite a long time, and even some, the data analytics that we're going to get into a little bit later. But can you talk about that experience and how it shaped your role as U.S. Fire Administrator?
Absolutely. Happy to. I went on the job in Memphis, Tennessee in 1986. Just graduated college, was heading to medical school, and the fire department was hiring, and I'd gone to paramedic school in my undergrad, so loved it and saw that as a great opportunity. So I was the sixth woman hired in Memphis Fire Department. I spent 7 years there before being recruited as an EMS specialist to the IAFF. And that's where I spent my next 26 years of my career, is really looking at research, understanding where we had significant gaps, because the challenges that we would have at the local level, and that's where we always see it, right? That's where everything happens, at the local level. And so whether it's an incident response, or we're looking at where to put a new station, or how to staff an engine, or how many, engines or trucks do you need? How many ambulances do you need? All of these questions are constantly coming at us from the fire service perspective. And so something that I learned early on in trying to answer those questions, because when you're at an international organization, everybody comes to you for the answers. And we didn't have sufficient data, or significant enough data, to be able to answer those on in every case. And so we would have to do significant targeted research in those local environments in order to answer some of those questions. And so through the years, as technology really ramped up, Esri, for example, became a thing. We had the ArcView GIS capability, and that's really old school now, because the technology and what they've been able to do with mapping and geospatial data is significant. And so we still leverage that quite often. But our national data system at that time, through the late 90s, thousands, even up until now, our national data system and where we're supposed to get significant information was not enabled for operations. And
Right.
so that really is what set the stage for what we're doing now. And it's those experiences that really had my mindset on what I needed to accomplish as the U.S. Fire Administrator.
Yeah, you kind of hit on it. I'm not saying, Esri is not necessarily a valuable tool for me, but in the sense that it's become expected that you utilize that tool, right, as a data analytic, as a data metric. I know that, the National Emergency Response Information System, NERIS, it's easier to say that for me because we all work in acronyms, is working to, enhance or be the next phase of the NFIRST program. And the NFIRST program has been around for quite a while. I don't even know when it started. I've only been in the fire service now for about 20 some years, and I've been working with NFIRST for quite a while. But one of the things and one of the challenges I'm sure you've probably heard from a lot of folks is being able to get the data back out of it to be able then to help address risk in your community. For me, being a fire marshal in my local community, and being able to get the data to be able to, be able to identify and mitigate that risk. Can you talk a little bit about, as we talk about community risk reduction and the value and kind of the emphasis a lot of fire departments are now putting on community risk reduction, can you talk about the value of data and how maybe NERIS will help kind of shape that data?
Absolutely. I first wanted to address what you just said about infers. Infers is our legacy system. It is going on 50 years old. So infers actually was stood up in 1975. So the USFA was established in 1974 based on the Fire Prevention and Control Act. And so one of the missions in our legislation is that we would host a national data center to look at fire or the incidence of fire and its impact on the nation. And so what infers does is certainly had been designed to look at the incidence of fire,
Hmm.
but not so much on the overall impact or operations or any of those things that really we need today. And
Yeah.
so the last time infers was updated is 1999 when we went to infers 5.0. And so it's been a while, right?
Mhm.
And so it is important that we look at leveraging technology. We look at leveraging the capabilities we have today, AI, all of those things that we all use every day. Why should our nation's fire service have privy to that as well? And so that's how we've designed NERIS. NERIS is not a database. NERIS is an analytics platform that ingests data, fuses the data, analyzes it, and provides back intelligence,
Okay.
not just summary numbers, not just what was your response time, how fast you get there, and when did you get back in service, but actually what was the incident? What did firefighters do when they show up? What was the chronology of what occurred on that scene? And how does that enable us to understand how to better design our response capability for the risk events to which we respond? Now, you ask about community risk reduction. Well, before you can do risk reduction, you have to know what those risks are. And so part of what we're building in NERIS platform is that baseline risk.
Mhm.
Every community's risks are different. We all have different population, we have different built environment, we have different topography, we have different weather impact. And so all of these things are risk and combined risk events can cause risk events based on those hazard levels. And so what we're doing within NERIS is as much data as we can bring into the platform to inform that risk. That's everything from, as I said, weather. We're going to have live weather feed. We're going to have the built environment. All of your structures will be there. We're working to get more information on those structures. Like, are they built to code? What are the building materials? All of the risks that go into one structure, right? What makes that structure hazardous or not? What is it in relation to the structure next to it? So all these things really design your street grid. All of these things design the environment into which our firefighters respond and our EMS professionals. And so it is important to understand that. And so NERIS will enable that kind of understanding of risk, and then we can look at how well the response capability, what are your resources to be deployed, match with that potential risk
Okay.
that happens in that environment. And how well that match is made really sets up your vulnerability or your gaps in that response capability. Now, what does that mean? Well, if we don't match resources to the risk environment or a particular risk event well, then we are vulnerable or have gaps in three different areas. One is firefighter injury and death, civilian injury and death, and property loss. Those are our three potential vulnerabilities for negative outcome on every event to which our firefighters respond, because everything is set up for matching, for them to intervene, to stop the risk event from escalating. If they don't have enough resources to arrive in a timely manner and the right equipment and the right training to intervene, then the risk continues to exacerbate the situation. So that's what we're working to do in NERIS. It's not just a database,
Right.
it's a platform that will provide intelligence to the local level.
Well, and it sounds like it's more of a proactive approach, as kind of how you kind of described it to me. It's more of it's a risk assessment, so that way I know where I need to deploy my resources. One is not only just as the fire agency making sure that I have firefighters given different sections of my city, but also too being able to deploy my resources to do proactive events, inspections, and targeted enforcement in certain areas, because now we have these analytics. I can plot them on a map. I can better understand it. It's just not a number on my spreadsheet. So that way I know that, well, I had, this incident over here, but how does it match with something that I had 2 weeks ago, something down the street? And so I think that for me as an end user, I think that it's very exciting to see how it will allow us to then be able to kind of shape and really, I think, be able to provide better service. Like you said, the three things, firefighter injury and death, civilian injury and death, and property loss. We're always trying to do that, right? No matter from the prevention side to the operations side. And I think that this platform will definitely benefit us in that regard. And I know a lot of us are using the Craig 1300 platform. It's a platform developed through NFPA and My Sidewalk, and not that I'm promoting it, but we happen to use it as part of our community risk assessment. I think, like you just said, building data in there. And then also too, can we get our demographics of our population to see where we're seeing some of this stuff as well. And I think that for us, I think you said it's more than just a database. It's more of a platform for us to get that information. How is it leveraging maybe AI? We see a lot in AI nowadays, right? Everything you can make movies now with AI, or maybe 10-second movies, but eventually it might get something a little bit more. But how is NERIS leveraging maybe AI technology and maybe some of the newer technologies that are on the horizon?
Great question. So we will be leveraging what we call narrow machine learning. And so machine learning is a form of AI that searches for primarily patterns, things that humans may not pick up, and things that we might not have seen in data as we're just scrolling. And even with some statistics, you're not going to pick up every pattern that's there. And so we're going to be using some machine learning as the model is trained. Now, you can't have machine learning until you have data to train the models. And so as we start to have data, we're onboarding. We have 165 departments that'll be completely onboarded by the end of December. We'll start onboarding another 500 in early January into February. And then all through the year, next year, we will work to onboard every fire department in the nation. And so it's important that we have data starting to come in that train the models, because the models will run and they'll run against your own community. So again, it's going to have that customizable capability for what are your risks, because we look at, let's say, Texas, it's very different risk than we're going to see in Michigan, perhaps, right? Or in New York or in Florida. And so on and on, we want these models to be able to recognize and be able to inform you at the local level. And so they'll look for things that are unusual. Today, with the data we have and the data that firefighters have put in, and I talk about this everywhere I go in the legacy system, there's a lot of drop downs, there's a lot of codes. Firefighters are not trained properly, first of all, on the system, but it's incredibly burdensome. It's ridiculous how burdensome NFIRS is. And so firefighters have found workarounds throughout their careers, right, so it takes less time. Well, one of those workarounds is choosing off an alphabetic list to what was the item first ignited, right? And a lot of times it's an appliance that's selected because it's A, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so that has enabled us over time to give the appearance that we have a lot of cooking fires, or kitchen fires. Now, not to say that's not the case. I'm just saying it may not be the case. And when we get better data, we're going to be able to see things we haven't seen before. I will tell you one of the patterns, it's sort of a unique thing that we're starting to see. We've had it highlight already 2 frozen chicken truck fires.
Really?
Who would have ever thought that we might, and this is only with the departments that have been onboarding, that we might have a frozen chicken truck? Right?
Yeah, that I would never have thought that is to be a problem. If I'm shaping my risk in my community, frozen chicken is not necessarily one of those things I would have thought about.
Exactly, right? So these are the kinds of things that we want to enable. We want to understand what is the real fire problem. One of the things we've had in NFIRS is the inability to code lithium-ion battery fires.
Yes.
And so lithium-ion battery fires across the nation have been coded because firefighters, again, were giving no instruction on how to code them. So everybody's, first of all, we're dealing with a new fire risk. And then
Right.
secondly, what do you call it? Well, if it was an EV, you might call it a vehicle fire. So you
Yep.
might code it like that. Some people may realize with micromobility, maybe that was an electrical fire. So they code it as an electrical fire.
Right.
Some folks who might even be even more, informed will realize it's hazardous material. And so they'll code it as a hazmat fire.
Right.
So we have no real grasp on lithium-ion battery risk in this nation yet because we don't have the data adequately to inform it.
Yeah.
So These are the kinds of things that NERIS is going to do. It'll allow you just to tell us what it was. It was a micromobility scooter, lithium-ion battery, and we used water to put it out, or we used a chemical to put it, chemical extinguisher to put it out. What happened? And so
Yep.
that's what NERIS is being designed to tell the story chronologically of just what happened. There are no codes. We just want you to put in what happened. And we'll have better data on injuries. We're going to have better data on firefighter injury and death, better data on civilian injury and death. All of these things that we are undercounting today
Hmm.
because of insufficient data.
Yeah, and you talk about the troubles with lithium-ion batteries, and really, one of the things that I think about NERIS is it allow me to better understand the data, not only in my community but also around my region, right? So one of the things that I do is I monitor the internet for lithium-ion battery fires, and typically not every one of them gets reported, right? Because even in my community, I know that we have battery fires every once in a while. But they don't make headlines. They don't make, headlines in my newspaper. But there was one in a community that was just actually neighboring our fire district or our fire authority. And, they had the fire. They mitigated the fire. They used, they packed it in a barrel with a powder extinguisher. And it was good. But our agency didn't know that they had a micromobility fire, didn't understand that. And so I had to work with my department to educate them and be able to share that. And so I think with NERIS, it's definitely going to help us better understand not only just our risk within our community, but also regionally. I think that that's one of the things that we're, like you mentioned, it's making sure that we have good data and better understanding it. Now, as we talk about lithium-ion batteries, and I think that this is a kind of a good segue, it's definitely an emerging technology. I've talked a lot with different UL representatives, and then I even talked with Laura Kavanaugh with FDNY about this, and what things that they're doing to kind of shape and mitigate, lithium-ion battery hazards within their community. But how is the U.S. Fire Administration, and I think you hit on one, is data, making sure that we have the right data to be able to address it. But how are you helping fire departments face and deal with these technologies? Because there are so many risks associated with lithium-ion battery fires.
Wow, that's a great question. So, excuse me. Yes, we are working directly on that problem. In fact, not only have we identified that as one of the main challenges after the U.S. Fire Administrator Summit. As you might know, we've been holding Fire Administrator Summits during Fire Prevention Weeks since 2020. Now, we were supposed to have been holding them since 1974 when we were put in place, but the first one was actually held in 2022, and now it's become annual, and Fire Prevention Week in October.
Mm-hmm.
And so each October, the nation's fire service comes together. Every fire service organization, every national organization is present. They are represented. We come together at this summit and we talk about what are the challenges that the fire service faces. And so it's presented in the summit, the best state of science. What do we know today? And where do we still have gaps? And so the day after the summit, by invitation, I bring in the national leaders and their plus ones, and we sit and we work for a full day. And what is our challenges? What are we going to do this next year? How do we come together? And that's where the One Voice effort has been. The fire service One Voice that evolved from this all hands effort. And so lithium-ion is one of those challenges among recruitment and retention and firefighter cancer and mental health and wildfire and building codes. And so we have these challenges that have been brought forward by the nation's fire service, and we work on those for the full year. And so we learn every lithium-ion battery incident, every fire is a research project. I often say that because we learn something. We need more research in this area. We need to understand suppression. We need to understand recycle. We need to understand disposal, all of those things around lithium-ion technology. And then the other way that we're learning in this space is during the Wildfire Congress, we hosted in the United States. It was a collaboration between USFA, FEMA, of course, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of State. All came together to host the first ever World Fire Congress. And so we put this together. We tried to identify the top fire officials around the world in every nation, like myself. Now, not every nation has a a fire administrator, right? Some of them have their top fire official maybe in the military, or they may be in the interior. And so you'll find that top fire official. Then we invited them all to the U.S. for this meeting so that we could sit down and discuss these challenges that we are all facing. And we had 56 nations, plus the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Group. We had the World Bank involved and many, many others. And so at the Wildfire Congress in May this year, lithium-ion technology was one of the challenges we discussed, as well as climate and severe weather events and wildfire. We looked at structure fire in urban areas. We also looked at firefighter health and safety. And so these challenges and where we come together, not just domestically, but internationally to learn. There are nations that are ahead of us on lithium-ion technology, fires and suppression, and like Singapore, for example. And so we learn from them. And then we share our knowledge about firefighter health and safety, perhaps, or our urban fire events. So these are the sorts of knowledge exchanges that USFA is supposed to be doing. That's in our legislation. And so as I went through the legislation, that's what really has set the stage for my administration and what we've done to try to pull the entire U.S. fire communities together to speak with one voice.
Yeah, it's a partnership, right? And that's one of the things that I think that, that will make us more successful, not only, nationally, but also internationally. And I think that, by pulling people together and having conversations and talking about this as a broader topic. I know that in my research, I see a lot from the London Fire Brigade and, and Great Britain, what they're doing on lithium-ion batteries. I see a lot from Australia and what they're doing, in Sydney and in different areas throughout Australia. And it is fascinating to kind of see how they're responding to it and some of the public education campaigns that they're putting into to be able to develop and be able to help address this problem. Now, you also mentioned wildfire and some of the risks associated with wildfire. I happen to be located in California, and our fire season typically is, I would say, starts in April and ends in the fall. And why I say the fall is because it keeps getting extended. Our fire season, due to weather changes and things like that, we're seeing, big fires now in November, and we'll see it typically starts a little earlier than what it is. And now our wildfire season is throughout the year. And we see now, I think that most of us have seen the headlines. New York and New Jersey have some big wildfires going on right now. As we talk about that, and as we talk about some of the risks associated with wildfire, it's one of those that, as I think about it, is what are some things that USFA is working towards on wildfire? I know that you've been very active in it, but also maybe some technology initiatives from predictive modeling to AI, some mitigation measures. What are some of those things that you've seen that have been successful across the country?
Wow. So wildfire has really been our focus. This year, we've already burned in the U.S. about 4 times what we did last year. So it's been a difficult fire year. The season started early. In fact, as we talk a lot, we don't have a season anymore. It's year round. And certainly this year is evidence of that, starting as early as February with some of the early fires in New Mexico, and then carrying on even now in the Northeast, where they've never seen these kinds of wildfires before. You never hear of fighting a wildfire in Connecticut or now, even today, New York and New Jersey with these wildfires. And so things have changed. Our baseline risks have changed. And so it is very important that we pay attention. And so what USFA is doing is not only leaning into wildfire and our response capability, but we are talking, getting on the ground, being out there with our firefighters who are responding, because that's important. It is the local fire departments that are responding. People think about, the U.S. Forest Service and the Department of Interior, but they respond on federal lands. We have to cover all of the community lands and the state lands. And so it's important that we recognize the training that they need in these communities that haven't seen wildfire like this before. We need to train them on wildland-urban interface, because strategies and tactics change from a vegetation fire to a community conflagration when you have structure-to-structure fire spread. And so understanding the strategies and tactics are very important. And so we do train a lot in that area. We've coupled with the International Association of Firefighters and the U.S. Forest Service in carrying out that training. We're going to have those classes at the National Fire Academy. And so that's part of it. The other thing we've done is to partner with the Department of Homeland Science and Technology, a directorate, and they have been testing for the last 3 years wildfire sensor technology that's AI enabled. And these sensors are sniffing sensors. They're not optical. And so they are put in place to supplement any cameras and in places where we can't get cameras perhaps. And so you can get these sensors. they sniff the smoke and the particulate and determine what it is. Is it a wildfire or is it somebody barbecuing, right? So the
Right.
AI enables that, and it will determine that. They can send alerts and warnings right into the dispatch of the local first responders. We deploy them with wind sensors, so we'll know direction that the smoke or wind is blowing, and to be able to enable. And so all of that data enables us to understand what's happening and how to respond to it. And so there's a lot of tech that is going on. We have an app that you can download called Wildfire Home Safe. It is in Google stores and also on Apple or Android. And so you can download it, and it's augmented reality. You hold it up to the front of your house and it'll tell you how to become fire adapted. It'll tell you you need to change out your roof or get the trees off or move the vegetation or wood fence or decks, right? So we've enabled this kind of technology. So it's free to download, and it's the one. There are several of them, but ours is the one with it's a black background, little white house, white flame, and it's called Wildfire Home Safe. And this is where we're leaning in to try to really enable communities to have a role in their own safety. We don't have enough firefighters across the nation to really have an impact on reducing the fuel load and reducing the risk from wildfire. So we need everyone to engage. And so these tools, we have a WUI tool to know where you live. Are you in a fire-prone land? So you can just search USFA WUI for WUI or wildfire or wildland urban interface, or just USFA wildfire, and find all these tools under technology, research and technology.
Well, that's a fascinating tool. I have not heard of that. The augmented reality, that is definitely a very cool tool. And it is definitely cool to see how the USFA is maximizing what technology is available. As you mentioned, with NFIRS being a 50-year-old system, and now we're moving more into the 20th and the 21st century as we talk about different technology initiatives. And being able to utilize that, leverage that technology is very fascinating. I just have one more question as we talk about that a little bit, and you kind of going back to the NERIS platform is, as we talk about, those wildfire sensors that are being deployed in working with U.S. Forest Service and those types of things, is that some of the data that eventually might make its way into the NERIS program? Because we talk about partnerships, that's another partnership that we can leverage data from another source to be able to help.
Absolutely. So USFA has a staff at the National Interagency Fire Center, as we call it, the NIFC. And so we have staff right alongside the U.S. Forest Service, Department of Interior, and others who are in that interagency fire center. And so USFA does work across the fire lines, we'll call it, with our federal partners. And U.S. Forest Service, their data people sit on technical advisory committees or technical committees, panels, we'll call them, for NERIS. And so they are very much in the loop, and we are very well aware of their data. So there is a point in time. We're focused on onboarding all
Right.
our departments right now, but there is
Yep.
a point in time where we will absolutely be ingesting data from the NIFC. We'll be ingesting data from many other sources to make sure that we have the one go-to data source in NERIS. And that's what you're going to be able to see. This is something that was recommended by the White House. It came out of the president's technology panel and some of the work around science and technology that was initiated at the White House. And one of the recommendations was a one source, a data platform. And so that's what we've built with NERIS, and we'll continue to enable that over time.
Yeah, we're no longer working in silos, right? We're all working together. Well, Dr. Lori, I really appreciate you taking the time to be able to share insight from the USFA, be able to share information with our listeners, because we work in building and fire safety, and the things and the initiatives that USFA puts forward definitely helps shape us. A lot of us attend the National Fire Academy and get a lot of value out of that. Maybe next time we can talk a little bit more about that. I know that you have other commitments. And so with that being said, where can our listeners find more information about the different initiatives that USFA is implementing and that we can take advantage of?
That's a great question. So do just look up USFA, United States Fire Administration. Go to our website. We have redesigned the website so that it is easy by subject matter, and you can find all the resources. Once you find the subject matter in the top panel, look down the left side, because there's a lot of navigation that you can do right down the left side of the page. And so if you get to USFA wildfire or WUI, then you look down the left, you'll find all this technology I've talked about. You can just say USFA NERIS, NERIS, and you'll be able to find the page on NERIS and be able to find everything you're looking for and keep informed. So we've really tried to make our website informative and current, and we work hard to keep it that way. So please take a look and stay informed.
Yes, absolutely. And, for me, I even use some of the public's social media that you provide on your website. Downloadable, it's easy for us. And so definitely appreciate it. And again, thank you for taking the time, valuable information and all that you have done. Like you said, you've brought a lot of people together. And I think that anywhere from the Fire Prevention Week summits and then also the World Fire Congress, I have definitely been very valuable and very excited to kind of see what's on the horizon.
Very good. Well, thanks for having me, and I wish you all the best.
All right. Thank you. All right. Well, Teresa will have to, I'll be able to cut it there. So it'll work. Perfect. So,
Very good. All
yeah.
right. Listen, it was a pleasure. I do have to
Yes.
run. I've got